You were out at the GM meetings this week, so let's dig into what was and also maybe what wasn't said. And that is really true when you look at the situation around the Arizona Coyotes. Commissioner Gary Bettman didn't say much about the future of the Yotes, but again, what's more interesting is what he didn't say.
Yeah, and that part to me is really what I've keyed in on over the last 24 to 48 hours. There's certainly a lot happening behind the scenes with the Coyotes. Now, let me be abundantly clear when I say this. I think the NHL's preference, when it's all said and done, is for this arena situation to be sorted out and that the team remains in Arizona. They've been committed to that market for feels like 2 decades now, with all the work that they've done to keep that franchise propped up. That said, we're reaching the end of the rope, and I don't think they have a ton of faith in this ownership group. And this is my opinion based on some of the information that we've received from behind the scenes, that getting to this auction date in June will ultimately be successful. Remember, they were up for a referendum in Tempe, and everyone was thinking this is a slam dunk, no chance that the Coyotes lose this vote. And they did. And they've been forced to consider some alternate realities since then. And so, really, the big thing for me is the league had an opportunity to come out this week at the GM meetings and say, definitively, the Arizona Coyotes are going to be remaining in Mullet Arena next season, regardless of whatever happens with this vote, because they did acknowledge that with, potentially this auction, being held, I think sometime in the June 10th range, no official date set yet, that they don't really have enough time to pivot and relocate that team for next season. So if you don't have enough time to pivot and relocate, then why not just come out and say they're remaining? My point is they're working on a ton of contingencies behind the scenes to potentially move this team for next season in Salt Lake City, regardless of even potentially them getting to that auction date.
So if there is still a chance, like you're saying, that the Coyotes still move, and you mentioned maybe some things behind the scenes that need to be figured out, what are some of the steps, or maybe a better word to use, what are some of the hurdles that the league would face in this process?
Well, that's the part that the league is actually sorting through themselves right now. What machinations does the league have to essentially wrestle back control of this franchise if that's what they want to do? Um, the point that has been driven home with me and speaking to many close to the situation in Arizona is that Alex Maruello, their owner, is not just confident, but has also been somewhat combatant in this issue, in that he's fully believing that he's going to get this arena deal done, that he's going to win the auction, that he's going to get steel and shovels in the ground to finally build this arena for the Coyotes. I think the league is less convinced, and they're looking through their constitution. They're examining their legal options of what can we do in this case if we want to take back control of this franchise. My understanding would be part of it would be to make Alex Maruello and this ownership group whole, with every dollar that he spent to this point, not just the fee to buy the franchise, but also the debt service that they've had, the checks that they've been writing to underwrite the franchise. There's a lot that goes into that. And then essentially take back control of the team to then have Ryan Smith from Salt Lake City come in and acquire the franchise with a significant relocation fee, which could then be distributed to a lot of the other owners around the league. I believe it would be 29 of them. Take out Arizona and take out the 2 most recent additions. I don't think they get a share, a significant sum of money. So that's the league's interest in doing so. The big question is, 1, can they do it? 2, will there be a fight? 3, do they have the stomach for it? Or is it better to just see if the Coyotes essentially succeed or fail on their own before then going through the next step in the process, and dealing with this on the other end? So then the next part of this would be, well, what happens with Arizona? Let's say they do decide to pull up stakes and somehow they work out a deal to relocate this team to Salt Lake City. what happens with the market. They're still big believers in the market. I think, and this is my opinion, that there would be some component to whatever happens next, where within the next 5 years or so, they then have the ability to bring an expansion franchise to Arizona, either with the same ownership or new ownership and a new arena already in place, that they can essentially start fresh. Though that's been some of the thought process that's been explained to me as to some of the contingencies and what's been going on behind the scenes. All of it unofficial, of course, but I think it's important that everyone knows, hey, the league is they're paddling underwater here to try and understand the situation and put their arms around it over these next 60 to 75 days.
And again, just to reiterate what you said off the top, if they wanted to come out and squash this, they very easily this week could have said, we are committed to the Coyotes staying at Mullet Arena again next season. Because regardless of how the land auction goes, that's where they're going to be. They can't pop up an arena in 2 months somewhere else in Arizona or in Phoenix. So interesting stuff with the Coyotes, as always. Let's move off of that and on to a couple of 4-letter words, Frank. LTIR and EBUG. Why are these two being brought up, and which one could we see action on first?
Well, they're being brought up because they're two kind of hot button issues. At least LTIR was heading into the GM meetings. Both of these things are actually also CBA issues. So if you asked me which one will be addressed first, my money would be on LTIR. I think there's, relatively easy ways to address this. And Ken Holland a couple years ago came to the meeting essentially just saying, why not just have a cap in place for your game night roster when it comes to the playoffs? Not an active daily counting, so to speak, but you can't ice a lineup that isn't cap compliant based on the total dollars that everyone would have available to them. That would seem to be the easiest fix. The big question that the league wants to know is this actually a problem, or are these different unique circumstances that pop up throughout the course of seasons where, whether it's Vegas or Tampa or whoever it might be, teams like to cry foul when really there actually is a bona fide injury. So with both of these scenarios, they're going to take it back to the managers and have a larger sort of poll, so to speak, to really take their temperature to say, do you really think this is an issue, and what should we do about it? And both of them in this case would require some bargaining with the NHLPA. But I think it's possible that by the summertime, we see some sort of options presented where both of these things could kind of be nipped in the bud.
If you want to hear more of Frank's takes on all three of these issues, a new episode of the DFO Rundown is available wherever you get your podcast from. Frank and Jason Gregor dug into all three of these with a little bit more detail earlier on the pod. That's a wrap on another edition of Icebreakers delivered by DoorDash. Take advantage of the new Double Dash feature, which allows you to add a second stop onto your order for 0 extra delivery fees. Dash that for the win with DoorDash.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.